It's been a busy weekend for our family. I congratulate my brother on getting married, and I can tell you that being downtown until about 11:30 at night on Saturday makes preaching 3 times on Sunday a little more challenging. But it's good to have family here. My sister, Kari McMahon, her husband Dave, their children, my in-laws have been here. My stepbrother, Harrison from Denver, good friends from Memphis. It's been a busy weekend and a great weekend, so thankful for that. Would you join me for a word of prayer this morning as we begin? Loving God, open our hearts and minds to once again hear these words of Jesus and to reflect upon them and to grow from them. And may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight. You are our rock and our foundation. Amen. Well, let me begin with a few humorous stories. Lying on his deathbed, a miserly old man calls to his long-suffering wife to come into the room, and he has a request to make of her. He says, I have worked really hard my whole life to make all of this money, and so I want to ask something of you. When I die, I'd like for you to take this money and put it in the casket with me. I'm going to take it with me when I die. And so the wife honored his request. The man died soon thereafter, and she went to the memorial service with a friend of hers, and right before the undertaker closed the casket, she slipped a small metal box into the casket. And she came back, and her friend said, surely you did not give that money and put that in the casket. She said, I told him that I would. I honored my promise. I got everything together. I deposited every penny into my account, and I wrote him a check. And if he can cash the check, then he can use the money. A man, after hearing a sermon on Psalm 52, which talks about lies and deceit, felt guilty, so he wrote this to the IRS. He said, I can't sleep knowing that I have cheated on my income tax. Enclosed is a check for $500. If I still can't sleep, I'll send you the rest. We're continuing this fall series, this journey through Matthew 5, 6, and 7, through what is perhaps the most famous block of Scripture called the Sermon on the Mount. Today we move further along in Matthew chapter 6, and I want to say a couple of things as we begin. What we find in these passages are some of the most challenging teachings in all of Scripture. And so we've talked about anger, we've talked about lust, we've talked about leadership, we've talked about being salt and light. Still ahead is worry and fear and anxiety. But today we come to perhaps one of the most challenging topics, and that is money, or a treasure, as Jesus calls it. Fred Craddock, who was a famous preacher, he passed away about 1.5 years ago. He's preached in this church a number of times. I knew him. I had the privilege of having him as a friend and also as a mentor. But years ago, he told the story about a church that wanted to reach the more secular world. So they took that famous passage of Scripture, 1 Corinthians 13, on love, and they substituted the word money for love. And it sounded something like this. If I speak in the tongues of mortals and of angels, but do not have money, I am nothing. If I could prophesy and understand all secrets and all knowledge, but have not money, I am nothing. If I didn't have money, I would be nothing more than a noisy gong, a clanging cymbal. Money is always faithful and kind, always hopeful and to be trusted. Money never ends. And now abide these 3 things: faith, hope, and money. But the greatest of these is money. Now, Fred, in his own creative and humorous way, has pointed to an undeniable truth in our culture. Money is worshiped, money is glorified, and it often trumps faith and hope. I'm reaching into my pocket, and I'm pulling out a $20 bill. You all have this probably in your wallet. If you turn the $20 bill to its back, you'll see a slogan on our currency that says, "In God we trust." But the truth of the matter is, many of us, perhaps all of us, are guilty of sometimes living our lives by a different slogan: "In money we trust." Would you agree with that, if we're honest? We live in a culture that is obsessed with money, driven by money, focused on money. Money means power and influence. It means accomplishment and prestige. Money is often the way that we judge other people based on how much they have or don't have. Money drives political passions and political campaigns, perspectives, elections. Money opens doors and it influences people. Money causes lots of problems in marriages and families. And guess what? Jesus was well aware of this reality, and so he talked about it often. He knew that so many of our stresses, our anxieties, our insecurities, and our problems in life are directly tied to money. And so he talked about it. What did he say? "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust consume and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust consume and where thieves do not break in and steal." Now, the truth of the matter is, we all store up treasures on earth. It's a part of living in this world. It's a part of playing the game of life. We have to have a place to live. We have to have a car to drive. We have to have clothes to wear and food to eat. But does it become our primary focus and our primary motivator? What does it mean to store up treasures in heaven? What does that look like? How do we do that? He continues, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." He didn't say where your heart is, there your treasure will be. He said where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. You see, heart follows treasure. There are lots of things that we're passionate about, but it doesn't mean that we put our money towards it. But if we put our money towards something, the chances of us being passionate about it and paying attention to it are very high. If you invest in the stock market, you're going to pay attention to the stock market. If you invest in a house, you're going to pay attention to the housing market. If you invest in your children's education, you're going to pay attention as to how they're doing in school. If you invest in the church, then you're going to pay attention to how the church is doing. Heart follows money. Jesus knew this. And then a few verses later, Jesus says, "No one can serve two masters. A slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth." I want to make a few observations this morning about this topic. Some of these come from my little book, and some of them I've added to this. So take these for what they are worth. The first observation is this: the church does a great disservice to its people if it only talks about money when it's asking for money and trying to raise money. Of course the church needs your money. We can't do the ministries and the programs and the outreach that we do here at Woodmont without your money. And if you give money to support Woodmont, we are grateful and we try to be good stewards of that money. But money should not just be talked about in church when the church is trying to raise it. It's something that all of us deal with on a regular basis, and it's something that Jesus talked about all the time. And Jesus wasn't interested in raising money for the church. He was interested in the way we view money and our understanding of it and our motive when dealing with it. The second observation is money is a reality that we all have to deal with. We have to think about it. We often stress over it. It takes money to live and survive in this world. It takes money to pay your mortgage. It takes money to buy groceries. It takes money to raise children. I've found out over the past 6 years that those suckers are expensive. It takes money to pay bills and to send kids to college. Money is a universal reality, and it causes a lot of stress, tension, and heartache in our lives, and every single one of us knows that. Third, how we use our money is a clear indication of our priorities and our values. Jesus makes it clear, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. These are timeless words of truth for human beings, not just for Christians, but for human beings in general. If you want to know what's important to somebody and you don't want to have a conversation with them, then ask them for their checkbook. They won't give it to you, but ask them for their checkbook or their American Express bill, and then you'll see what's most important to that person. Fourth, money is the number one source of conflict in marriage, and it often leads to major problems in families. And this has to do with lifestyle expectations and standards of living. It has to do with honesty and transparency. It has to do with motivation and entitlement. You want to see a good family fight? Watch them fight over an inheritance. Fifth, money is directly tied to power and influence. And those who have money are often able to control situations and circumstances. And sometimes this is good, and sometimes this is not good. It all depends on motivation and intentions. Those who have wealth have the ability to make a tremendous difference in this world, but only if they choose to do it. Sixth, people who have been blessed financially have the opportunity to help other people out. Begrudging or resenting somebody because they are successful or wealthy accomplishes absolutely nothing. What I've found is that challenging people who have the means to make a difference is a much better approach. Jesus never said that being rich is wrong. He said it's wrong to be rich and to keep it all to yourselves. To whom much has been given, much will be required. There is a moral responsibility. And lastly, this observation, having money does not entitle anyone to act superior to or better than other people. There are many types of entitled people in our culture, but there's a couple groups that you often hear talked about. One group is those who work the system and get free handouts when they could otherwise work. But there's another group, and that's the people that are wealthy who think that the rules don't apply to them, but they apply to everybody else. And it's true that both groups are present in our culture. In his book, Counterfeit Gods, Presbyterian minister Tim Keller says this. He says, money is one of the most common counterfeit gods that there is. When it takes hold of your heart, it blinds you to what is happening. It controls you through your anxieties and lusts, and it brings you to put it ahead of all other things. You know, for ages, people have wrestled with the question, does money buy happiness? And I don't know how many of you are country music fans, but if you are, then you're very familiar with a song that came out a couple years ago by Chris Janson, because they played this thing over and over and over again on the radio. It's called It'll Buy Me a Boat. You remember this song? Chris Janson says, I ain't rich, but I dang sure want to be. Working like a dog all day ain't working for me. I wish I had a rich uncle that had kicked the bucket and I'd be sitting on a pile like Warren Buffett. I know everybody says that money can't buy happiness, but it could buy me a boat, and it could buy me a truck to pull it. And it could buy me a Yeti 110 iced down with some silver bullets. Yeah, I know what they say, money can't buy everything. Well, maybe so, but it could buy me a boat. You remember that song? Can't get it out of your head once you hear it. If you think money buys happiness, listen to this story. Back in 1928, a group of the world's most successful financiers met in Chicago at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. The following men were present. The president of the largest utility company, the greatest wheat speculator, the president of the New York Stock Exchange, a member of the president's cabinet, the greatest bear on Wall Street, the president of the Bank of International Settlements, and the head of the world's greatest monopoly. Collectively, these guys had more wealth than the U.S. Treasury at the time. And for years, newspapers and magazines had written about these guys, telling the youth of America, these are the guys that you need to follow because they figured out how to be successful, how to make money. Look at their lives. Well, 25 years later, 2.5 decades later, here's what happened to that group. The president of the largest independent steel company, Charles Schwab, lived on borrowed money the last 5 years of his life, and he died broke. The greatest wheat speculator, Arthur Cutten, died abroad insolvent. The president of the New York Stock Exchange, Richard Whitney, served a term in Sing Sing prison. The member of the president's cabinet, Albert Fall, was pardoned from prison so he could then go and die at home. The greatest bear on Wall Street, Jesse Livermore, committed suicide. The president of the Bank of International Settlements, Leon Fraser, committed suicide. The head of the world's greatest monopoly, Ivar Druger, committed suicide. All of these men had learned how to make money and how to be successful, but not one of them had learned how to live. And so here's the deal. Jesus is concerned with how we live. Jesus is less concerned with whether you have a lot of money or some money or enough money or hardly any money, but he is very concerned about how you live. It matters how we live. Our motives and our intentions make a difference. The way we treat other people, regardless of who they are or what they have, makes a difference. And that's what Jesus is concerned about in the Sermon on the Mount. So that begs the question that we should all wrestle with. How then should we live? How should we live? Well, I want you to ask yourself that question. I'll leave you with 3 thoughts, and you can keep pondering it. The first answer is that we should live grateful lives. Grateful for what we have, grateful for our many blessings, grateful for the people that are in our lives. If we spend our entire lives always wanting more, we will never be satisfied and we will never enjoy the things that we have. A lack of gratitude in life leads to a constant state of restlessness and a desire for more. Jim Schleicher made the comment a couple Wednesdays ago at the seminar. He says, anxiety and gratitude do not go well together. If you're looking for a way to eliminate or reduce the anxiety in your life, then be grateful for the blessings that you have. If we're not grateful for what we have now, then what in the world makes us think we're going to be grateful when we get whatever it is that we want? We won't. We're called to live grateful lives, thankful lives. The second answer, we're called to live generous lives. Generous with our time, generous with our talent, generous with our money. We all have the ability to make a difference in this world on different levels, various levels, but only if we choose to. There is a lot of need in this world. There are a lot of charities in this town, all doing good work. Sometimes it's overwhelming. But the truth is, we all can make a difference in some way and on some level, and we're called to live generous lives. Holding on to everything that you have only smothers your spirit. And finally, we're called to live fearless lives. You know, there's so many people that hoard their money and their possessions out of fear. Fear that they won't have enough, fear that they'll run out, fear that others will have more, fear that they'll feel inadequate. But fear is no way to live, and Jesus says that all the time. This past week, I got to go and speak to a group at Hillsborough Pres, and it was about my book. It was a great lunch group. But as I was leaving the church, I noticed a sign that they have by their driveway on the way out. And I think we probably ought to get some of these signs for Woodmont. It says on the sign, "Go out into the world and fear nothing." Go out into the world and fear nothing. Perfect love casts out fear, we read in the Bible. Go out into the world and fear nothing. That's the message that Jesus has for us. No matter what we might be dealing with, no matter what we might be going through, no matter what hurts or pains or situations we have on our shoulders, do not live in fear. Fear not, he says. There will be enough. There is enough to go around. You're not by yourself. And remember, I love you. Amen.